I'm the Senior Director of Business Development responsible for our alliance with Microsoft. And I've actually been in this role at F5 now for over 13 years. So definitely a Microsoft fan. I feel like I'm in the walls here at Microsoft quite a lot. So Microsoft is a really important relationship for us at F5. You probably know this, but Microsoft is one of our most important customers, as well as a critical go-to-market partner. We share many of the same customers out there. Most of our customers are the large enterprises that you guys are engaging with, and our intent with you is to bring them over to Azure. So with that, I know this is a technical call and you don't want to hear from the business guy too much, so I'm going to get you over to Greg Coward.
Thanks, Jeff. And good morning, everybody. Once again, my name is Greg Coward. I'm a solution architect with F5 Networks. So I work entirely on public cloud with F5 Products and Services on the business development team. So I work underneath Jeff and Ryan Korok, who's watching me across the table right now, giving me dirty looks just to make sure I do it right. So I'll try to do well. So as the agenda goes, and this is going to be the next few minutes, we want to talk about a few different things. But as you see on the agenda here, the first thing I want to do is just kind of give an F5 refresher and some updates. So kind of make sure the field and everybody out there on the line is familiar with what F5 does and some of the products and services we offer. I'm sure people have heard about F5, have various understandings of what we offer. So hopefully we'll clear that up, everybody level set. And then really we want to specifically talk about a little bit about ExpressRoute solutions and then do a little bit of demoing at the end of it, see if the demo gods are nice to me. But we want to talk about ExpressRoute and what we can do with that and how F5 and our joint customers are making use of ExpressRoute and our solutions to basically extend and move up into the cloud. So without further ado, let's kind of kick into this.
No audio.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear us? Looks like
now we can hear you, but couldn't hear anything more.
If you're not presenting, could you please mute your microphones, please? Everyone that is not presenting, please mute your mic. This is a live bridge. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for the heads up. So let's start again real quick. Once again, we're going to talk about F5's products and services, give you a quick update of who we are, what we do. And then we're going to talk specifically about some of the solutions that we're seeing in the field with regards to ExpressRoute and F5 and Azure. So with that said, let's kind of give you a rundown of F5. So once again, we are and have always been historically a hardware load balancer. That's what we're known in the field of as, which is a great thing. Unfortunately, it's kind of a double-edged sword because we're always known as that load balancer, and people don't really understand that we can do so much more, and we do so much more. Especially when we talk about public cloud and you have native technologies, obviously like Azure Load Balancer. We're not a competitor. We basically augment those solutions. We'll take a look at that here in a second. So kind of an evolution of who we are. So as you can see here back on the left side, 2006, we came out with our modern application delivery controller. This is where we actually became a true full proxy. Come down a few years down the road, 2011, as things start changing, we start virtualizing. We offer the Hyper-V Virtual Edition. So now you can actually spin up the big IP on Hyper-V, run a virtual edition. The format and the factor, the platform is exactly like you see on hardware. So that's an important thing. When we talk about whether I'm using a big 8U chassis of F5 or I'm down to a virtual edition running in Azure, you're using the same products and services. It's really not just a question of speeds and feeds. So come forward a little farther up the line here in 2015, we actually released our virtual edition on Azure. Much like our fellow vendors in this market in other spaces, we started off, of course, the goal was just to basically lift and shift. How do we get our big IP to run in Azure? And we work very closely with the Azure networking team. We do on a regular basis, which is great. Gives us the ability to make use of new changes. For example, when you talk about Azure, when we first started with Azure, we were able to get our big IP up there with one NIC, one IP. Well, obviously things have changed. Now we can offer basically our devices with multiple interfaces, multiple IPs. We can offer a per app version. There's all kinds of hosts of ways to deliver our services up there. And we constantly are innovating and changing to basically make our services, as cloud friendly and as cloud native as possible. So that's kind of our goal from a corporate standpoint. And as you see here on the very last slide on 2018, we do also offer our Azure Stack version. So we offer the big IP syndicated on Azure Stack. We're doing a lot of testing with that. We'll have some good stuff hopefully coming down the road to show as well.
We lost audio again.
Yeah, somehow we're getting muted. Sorry about that, but thank you for letting me know. So once again, F5 Technologies, we have LTM, which is our local traffic manager. That's our traffic management engine. We have DNS, which is our geolocation, our global DNS service, global load balancing. We have AFM, which is our layer 3, layer 4 firewall technology. We have ASM, and that's our WAF, and this is our big one up in Azure. This is deployed everywhere. So this is our WAF offering. And then we have APM. APM is our identity and access management solution, or once again, we're going to talk about that as well. And the nice thing to really take note of is all these services can be run individually, and they can also be run and bundled up on the same device. You can deploy these any number of ways. And once again, it doesn't matter whether you're using an 8U chassis or an Azure VE, we can run all these same functions. And then the one on the right there, we're going to talk a little bit more when we actually get to the demo, and this is Big IQ. This is our centralized management offering. So our platform that basically controls and manages big IPs all over the place. We're going to take a look at that and how ExpressRoute really helps that out. And I saw we went on mute again, so I'm going to keep watching that. So I'll unmute
I
it.
think every time you advance your slide, it's
Mutes me?
at the same time.
Okay, so Teams, we'll keep an eye on that. So let me just click again here, and when I advance the slide, I'll watch it. And then once again, specifically to F5 and Azure. So when we first came out with Big IP up in Azure, we had what's called BYOL, bring your own license. That was the only option. I mean, once again, we're historically a platform vendor on premise. So we made a lot of changes, not just with our technology and our offerings, but also how we offer them and also how we can license them. So up in the Azure, you can have BYOL, bring your own license. We do offer utility/pay-go models as well, so you can deploy a big IP out of the marketplace through an ARM template, what have you, and use it as utility billing. And we also offer enterprise licensing agreements, where we can offer bulk licenses that can be then distributed and used by big IPs, pulled back in. And we're actually going to see a little bit of that in our demo as well. And then, of course, now for cloud-native deployment models. So once again, we're a VM, which means we have the ability to be deployed like any other VM up in Azure. We can be deployed through the marketplace. We have a host of different marketplace offerings, whether it's a WAF, whether it's an Office 365 solution, whether it's a low-end per-app VE, whether it's going to be a full-blown multi-app device, what have you. Any way you want to do it. But it can be done through Marketplace, it can be done through ARM templates, and of course, through any kind of a declarative API. So the majority of our customers honestly probably deploy the big IP, not out of the Marketplace. They use ARM templates. They integrate those ARM templates in their orchestration engines, be it Jenkins, Ansible, what have you. Okay, and then of course on the far right there is Azure Security Center. So as I mentioned, we spent a lot of time working with the Azure networking team over the years, from the beginning of Azure all the way up to now. And we really are focusing a lot of our energy as well on integrations. Our first big integration was with Azure Security Center. And this gave us the ability to integrate our WAF, once again, our ASM, that could be triggered and monitored and configured via the Azure Security Center. So it was a very tight integration. And we're constantly looking for other ways to do that integration. For example, we're recently coming out with some new guidance and templates on basically configuring and employing your big IPs and automatically configuring integration with OMS and log analytics. And we can create dashboards automatically. Some really cool stuff that we're really trying to make sure that we're fully integrated as much as possible and constantly changing that. So always be on the lookout for new stuff coming. Okay, I'm going to change pages. Let's see if we get muted here. No, we're good. All right. Okay, we'll continue on. Okay, so let's get a little bit more into our technologies here. So once again, F5 modules and technologies. LTM, or Local Traffic Manager. This is the basis, the meat of our big IP. This is where we do our layer 4, layer 7 load balancing. This is where we can do things like caching, compression, SSL offload. We have the ability to do iRules. If you haven't heard of iRules, that's our programmatic platform for basically manipulating traffic as it comes through. We also have intelligent traffic steering, once again, tied to iRules. And then, of course, IPsec tunneling. So we also offer IPsec services as well. And in our demo we're going to have here, it's connecting my lab in Redmond to Azure. So unfortunately, my boss, Ryan, who's across the table looking at me, will not give me the funds to use ExpressRoute. So it's kind of hard to demo it. But what are you going to do? So instead, what I have is I use a VPN connection. Once again, kind of the same effect. We're getting the same thing. Obviously, from a protection standpoint, and we look at some of our stuff down the road here in the demo, ideally, we want to be using ExpressRoute. With that said, you can certainly use VPN, and you're going to see it in action, probably better for a failover situation. There we go. Continue on. Got Ryan off the hook. All right. Application Security Manager, ASM. This is currently our big bread and butter up in Azure. This is our web application firewall. Extremely robust, highly configurable, which is good and can be challenging for people as well that don't have a lot of experience with WAFs and F5 technologies. The nice thing about that is we do offer templates, we do offer marketplace offerings, and of course Azure Security Center offering, where we can basically walk you through the process fairly easy to get a WAF up in front of your applications quickly, and you're being protected. So very cool stuff. Do a lot of integrations, a lot of work with ASM. All right, Advanced Firewall Manager. Like I said, this is our layer 3, layer 4 firewall technology. Now, realizing obviously Azure has NSGs and has other methods as well, but we do have customers that are using the big IP with AFM to do traffic manipulation and some traffic control in their Azure virtual networks. So it's something out there as well. Once again, ICSA lab certified firewall, layer 3, layer 4. And then Access Policy Manager. So Access Policy Manager is once again our identity and access management solution. It gives you all kinds of cool stuff, but really specifically, things we're looking at is, it gives you that strategic point of control where I can have all my applications, whether my applications are on premise, whether my applications are up in the cloud, regardless of what cloud you're in, whether we're using third-party applications like Office 365, whether we're using Salesforce, what have you. We can be that strategic point of control. We can be that single point of authentication and authorization. So we offer full integration with SAML, OAuth Federation, single sign-on. We offer multi-factor, various flavors. We integrate with various third-party vendors to offer multi-factor authentication. We obviously have AD Azure AD integration, so we can use those as our authentication or source of truth. And then real important down at the bottom here, fairly new, part of that is O365 Federation. So we've been doing O365 Federation where we can work to load balance ADFS servers and WAP servers, or we can replace them entirely with our solution. We've had that for a while, but now recently though we actually came out with PIP support. So I believe we were at least the first, I don't know if we're the only vendor that's actually certified by Microsoft to provide PIP support. So that's pretty cool. In any of these technologies, if you're interested in, reach out to us and we can give you all kinds of information. I'll even let you try it out. All right, last but not least, DNS. I think last but not least, nearly last but not least. DNS, Global Traffic Manager. This is our global server load balancing mechanism. Used very extensively. This is probably our #2 most popular service offering. This can run on top of and work with Azure Traffic Manager, your VNets. It can basically be used to provide geolocation services, sending our users to the closest location, high availability across the globe for your various resources as well. This is a service, and once again, all of these modules, including DNS, can run on the virtual edition. They can run on hardware. They can run on premise. They can run up in your cloud, up in Azure as well. They can run individually, or they can run all together. Depends on how you want to do it and what's your flavor. All right. So that was basically who we are at F5. Those are our modules, those are our services. So now we're going to do a little bit of demo here, and really the topic was ExpressRoute, so it's kind of hard. Well, two reasons why it's kind of hard. Number one, we already talked about Ryan won't give me an ExpressRoute, so that's a problem. Number two, of course, is you know, what do I demo ExpressRoute? Okay, so we'll do a demo of ExpressRoute. It's turned on, and it's connected, and we can get traffic through it, so that's great, ExpressRoute. So there's not a whole lot I can demo, but I can really do is show you what we do with ExpressRoute with our customers, and we see our customers using F5 and ExpressRoute in Azure. We'll show you what they do there, and I'll give you a little bit of demo of our Big IQ and how we're using the Big IQ to manage our workloads up in Azure, on-premise, other clouds, what have you. So there we go. So before I kick into the little demo here, and I have about a 2.5-minute demo of actually deploying an application, I'm going to kind of flip things up here. I'm going to come back to the little demo to show you how it happens. What I want to do, though, is actually jump in live to our Big IQ, and let's take a look at a couple of the applications. And hopefully we won't get muted. Let's take a look. So this is my Big IQ. If you've had a chance to see a Big IP, Big IQ looks entirely different. Once again, this is our control plane. This is our centralized management platform.
Hey, I'm not sure if you realize you're not sharing that new screen.
Thank you very much. I just told that. Thank you, teams. Let's see if we can figure this out here.
Sometimes it's easier to just share your desktop.
Yeah. How's that look? Coming up? Good. There we go. I think we're good.
Sweet.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, let's log in here. So once again, this is my Big IQ, a centralized platform. I'm going to log in. So now this device is actually running in my lab in Redmond here. So I have my on-premise environment. Hopefully I'll be able to reach it from here. I can. So I have my on-premise environment in Redmond, and in Redmond I have my data center. I have my Big IQs, as you can see here, and then I have my VPN tunnels connected from my lab up into Azure. Currently, I'm connected up into F5 Demo VNet East US. I also have a connection back to North Europe as well. So here's my resource groups up there. For example, here's my networking. All connected up to my Big IP, so I'm using Azure Network on the other side. And then all my different resources groups as well. So the Big IQ, here's my Big IQ. So let's take a look at this. So before I do this, I'm going to actually swap back here as I want to do this and make sure this works. I want to take a look at a couple scenarios for you here. I'm going to go past this. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to go back to the Big IQ, but I want to cover a few of the scenarios first, probably a better order. So once again, these are scenarios where we actually use Big IP, and we have customers working with us and Azure as they start moving workloads. So a couple of the use cases, and this one actually came to us from Microsoft, from our networking team at Microsoft as a request, that we have joint customers that are actually using ExpressRoute. And the nice thing about ExpressRoute, it gives you high speed, good connectivity to your between your data centers and your Azure subscriptions. But it's one big giant pipe. So we actually had requests from customers to basically isolate and secure traffic within that tunnel. So naturally, well, hey, you know, it's as weird as it sounds, you know, a great way to do that is basically you have an ExpressRoute circuit. We're just going to go ahead and set up an IPsec tunnel in between that. So what we do in this case, when you look at the diagram here, is we're actually able to set up a Big IP virtual edition up in Azure. We have a Big IP on premise. It can be virtual edition, it could be big chassis, doesn't really matter. And then we set up an IPsec tunnel between those two. So basically, we're setting up a tunnel between two endpoints going across the ExpressRoute tunnel or connection, and that gives us something that we can work with for securing specific parts of traffic. That was a weird way to say it. But let me do an example for here in the screen here. I have web servers up in Azure. I have app servers up in Azure as well. My application servers need to connect back to my database farm. My web servers need to connect back to my Active Directory on premise to do authentication. all those different pieces of traffic can be isolated using routing, using BGP, using our IPsec tunnel, can be isolated and protected even from other traffic within the ExpressRoute tunnel to connect our app servers back to the database farm, to connect our web servers back to Active Directory for authentication. So once again, it's just a method of isolating and securing traffic within the tunnel. We have a decent blog post out there. I say decent because I wrote it, so I don't want to say good, but we have a blog post out there on Dev Central, our community site that describes the solution. If you have any more information about that or customers, by all means, let us know. But fairly straightforward, IPsec within a ExpressRoute tunnel. All right, extending workloads into Azure. This is actually becoming quite common. So think about it this way. I'm an end user. We have a lot of customers that have been using big IPs on premise for a long time. They're wanting to start extending workloads up into Azure. So rather than actually, putting a front end up in Azure, putting up an Azure load balancer, putting up a big IP, which we'll see in a second, putting something else up there, they're just actually hosting their workloads up there. They're migrating their workloads into Azure, but they're actually being serviced and managed by the big IP on premise. Now I'll show you this here in a second, actually live on one of our big IPs. But because we have the ExpressRoute circuit, or in this case a VPN, I can use my backend workloads and I can load balance to them just like they're on premise. So I can expose my endpoint, as you see in the diagram here. I'm actually exposing to the world through my big IP on premise, doing my federation, doing my single sign-on, doing my ASM, what have you, on premise. That's going back to a big IP across the wire to my workloads. So I can have workloads on premise, I can have workloads in the cloud, I can configure prioritization that will automatically hit my workloads on premise first, and then as capacity dictates, I can start pushing workloads up into Azure and also pushing traffic up into those workloads as well. Very cool, becoming very common actually, and it's a good way to start dipping your toes and migrating those applications up into there. And as we have here down here, it basically kind of enables that cloud first homing. In other words, you can start putting applications up there, but they're still going to be homed at home. Kind of a weird way to say it. Homed at home. All right, let's take a look at the third one here. This is where it gets fun. And all this stuff is fairly new. So here's kind of a common scenario. So traditionally, our customers, our joint customers, would use big IPs on premise a little different than we use it now. Rather, they use it a lot differently than we use them now. Traditionally, you would have a pair of big IPs, once again, big chassis, supporting all your applications or a very large percentage of your applications that are hosted on-prem, all behind one pair of big IPs. So for example, my app server one there could be my SharePoint farm. I could be also publishing Exchange in the middle. I can have some other websites or some other stuff that I'm publishing for my app 3, all of those running behind one pair of big IPs. Works great, it scales well because we have hardware that can handle it. But now we're starting to do things differently. So as we kind of progressed into becoming more of a cloud native offering, we introduced the BigIQ centralized management system. So now BigIQ, once again, as I mentioned, that's our management control plane. It's our centralized system where we can actually provision big IPs, we can deploy big IPs across the globe, and we'll see that here in a second, and configure them all remotely. That way we have consistent policies, we have a central repository, a central dashboard for monitoring applications, and it can all be done from a location, and none of that is possible without having something like an ExpressRoute. Once again, you're going to see in VPN, but really for production, ExpressRoute's the way to go. So we have BigIQ, and with BigIQ, it gives me the ability to do a little bit differently. So now with BigIQ, I can actually deploy what's called per app VEs, so very small virtual editions of big IPs that are designed to basically service one application. The nice thing about that is we can have them through the big IP, through BigIQ, push them up to Azure, push them on premise. We can put out little scale sets of these virtual editions, and we can scale dynamically, just like you do in the cloud. We can scale dynamically to handle the workloads. So be very efficient. Because we have centralized licensing with BigIQ, I can license those VEs. I can pull those licenses back in and reuse them as I need to as well. So it's very effective from a cost perspective as well. So we start doing that. So now we kind of take the next step. Well, heck, if we could have a decent connection back up to Azure, I can do the exact same thing with Azure. So now I can deploy scale sets of big IPs on premise, and I can also deploy them out of BigIQ up into Azure. And what that means is I can actually deploy a scale set of big IPs. It's an Azure scale set sitting behind an Azure load balancer, believe it or not. that provides all those services, provides WAF, provides APM, provides advanced traffic management services. All those things can be deployed out of the big IQ in scale sets that automatically, dynamically expand and contract to handle demand. And it's all, once again, all these are managed from one location. Super important. Okay, so now let's take a look at the big IQ a little bit. So here's a big IQ, once again on premise. I've been very lightweight. In other words, I just put the stuff here to kind of make the demo work, but let's take a look at it. So here's our devices to start with. So these are my devices. Right now I have basically one big IP that's sitting on premise. That's my big IP 02. I have one up in North Europe in Azure, and I also have one on East US. Pretty straightforward. The nice thing about this is I also have the ability to manage licenses for these, so I can actually license these big IPs remotely. So one of the challenges we ran into when we first went to Azure was this whole notion of licensing. We're historically a shop that does BYOL, or enterprise license agreements. It doesn't really work too well when you're talking about things like scale sets up in the cloud. When you want to scale in and scale out these devices, licensing would become unwieldy, basically impossible. So how we handle that is obviously, first off, we offered utility billing, so it's built through Microsoft. We also do offer, as I mentioned, our ELA, the ability to buy groups and pools of licenses and deploy them as you see fit, bring them back in and reuse them. That's only possible with the big IQ. And that's what we do here. So as these big IPs were spun up, and I spun up earlier to be honest for time's sake, but as they spin up, they automatically call back to the big IQ and are licensed. Very nice. So another thing about big IQ when we talk about it is when we talk about configuration, I can actually configure my security policies, for example. We'll focus a little bit on WAF here. I have the ability to control and configure a centralized security policy or policies, network policies, things like threat intelligence. I can configure those in one location, and then I can push those out to all my WAFs, regardless of where my big IPs are sitting in the world, whether they're up in Azure, whether they're on premise, whether they're in another cloud, whether they're in a data center hosted at Equinix. It doesn't matter, as long as I can reach to them, which I can with ExpressRoute, I can now configure those and push them out and have, once again, a very consistent policy. It's very nice. And I won't go too much into the details here. Other things I can do, obviously, is I can do things like certificates. I can create, let me click on here. I can upload and publish and deploy our certificates to all these big IPs out there as well. So we have centralized certificates, centralized license, centralized policy control, all done through here. Now, really the cool stuff here, and this is why I deployed the, I wanted to show you this before deploying the application, or show you the application. It's the ability to take a look at our applications from a central pane. Sorry about that. So here on my screen here, these are my applications. Right now I have two applications deployed. I have one up in Azure, and that one is actually East US Azure, and I have one on premise. So when I say applications, what I'm talking about is the actual configuration to publish the backend workloads. So I have big IPs up there. We deploy big IPs up there. And then after that, what I'll do is, and I'll show you this in our little demo, we actually then will push out a configuration to the big IP. So what that does, that'll create things like a virtual server, which is our listener, our front end. It'll create backend pools. It'll add all those workloads in there. It'll deploy an ASM policy. It'll configure an ASM policy. It'll do all that stuff, configure it, get it up and running, come back here, and then we can sit there and monitor it and make changes as we need to. All, once again, from a central location, giving the ability to have very consistent policy across the board. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the stuff that we see here. And hopefully we'll have some traffic to take a look at. So for example, this is some of the stuff you kind of see. So you'll see, notice here, this is my up in Azure. It actually shows an attack and a good amount of traffic. But from this location here, I can take a look at information about my application. I can scroll down here and take a look at, there's a little guy in my way. I can actually look at graphs and data, what's going on for transactions, for current connections, which probably has very little at the moment. Let me raise that up. Look at things like page load times, client sides, returns, response codes, what have you for this application. even though this is running up in Azure, and I can push this information up to Log Analytics. We have a central pane for it here. I have my on-premise one as well. See my information going on. Once again, I can take a look at information about the application. I can take a look at the client. So for example, the client, scroll down here. Once again, transactions, page load times, we get all kinds of information to make decisions based upon that. We can look at the environment. I can take a look at my information here from a graphical perspective. I can look at my backend servers. Once again, these are workloads that are actually running up in Azure. Take a look at these guys right here. Containers. So looking at my workloads running up in here. Here's one of these guys right here. He's probably 10.1 something, 10.1, 10.5. All these guys can be configured right here. And you'll notice this one, as I mentioned, this is Azure on-prem. So this is my on-prem application. It's a big IP on-premise serving workloads that are located up in Azure. So actually, both my two web servers here are actually servicing the same workloads. One's located in Azure, one's on-premise. But once again, it gives me a lot of graphical information, a lot of good stuff with regards to traffic patterns, things that are going on. Get my mouse to work. Let's put that away. All from one central location. Now we also have the notion, I'll show this a little bit in the video here, of actually connecting to our cloud. So all this, once again, we can deploy all this stuff up into Azure directly out of BigIQ. And the way we're able to do that is we have our notion of cloud providers. So I can configure an Azure cloud provider, providing my tenant information, my subscription information. I can configure my cloud environment. So what BigIQ will do, it'll take the cloud provider's information, credentials. It'll actually make a call out to Azure. So it takes a couple seconds here. Maybe more than a couple seconds, depending where we're at. 3, 2, 1. There we go. And it'll actually query my region, my location, so I can specify which region. It'll look at my license types available to me. It'll look at the big IPs that are available to be deployed. So these are all the ones that are actually in the Azure marketplace that I can actually work with. So I can deploy, make a decision on the big IPs I want to deploy for my scale set. The instance sizes I want to configure, for example, what instance sizes are available to me for that. My virtual networks, all this information. So it reaches out to this. I can configure this. I can store this. And then taking that with my device templates, which we have here as well, which I can configure. I can configure all the information necessary. For Azure, there's no whole lot, there's not a whole lot involved because it's all basically configured by Azure. But I can actually configure all the stuff for the devices and then deploy those devices directly out of Azure, or directly out of the BigIQ into Azure. And then at that point, I'm able to deploy my application. Pretty straightforward. So real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap back over to our presentation here, and I'm actually going to do that little 2.5-minute demo showing an application be deployed. And the application we're going to deploy is, I'll get back to it, is this App Azure application. So this one I actually deployed a little earlier so I can get some traffic pumping through it. So let's take a look and see what that's all about. Pretty straightforward. All right, here we go. Go and start my little video. Pretend I'm actually doing it. So once again on the BigIQ, these are my different devices, stuff we already kind of looked at. We'll go through here really fast here. Once again, the ability to configure licenses. I can deploy licenses as part of my deployment. You'll notice here those ones are actually assigned licenses out of the pool. Go to my applications. You notice down the bottom here we have a catalog templates. So I have all kinds of templates. We're going to look at those in a second here. So I can create multiple templates for different applications, for different types of devices. So my end users can deploy an application without having to know anything about the big IP. All they really need to know is a few pieces of information, which you're going to see here in a bit. All right, so once again, looking at our Azure environment. Once again, for choices. And then let's go to, come on up, to application templates. So once again, we have various application templates preloaded. You'll notice I have one for Azure F5, HTTPS, WAF, load balancer. This is basically all the information that's required to configure that big IP that was deployed by the BigIQ. This is all the information required to deploy that application. In other words, the virtual server, the backend pools with those workloads, the SSL certificates, the TCP profiles, all that information is loaded in there. It's saved. Then I can come in here as a user, click on Create Application like I'm doing here, select my template, fill out a little bit of information, Give the app a name. As you saw that, F5 demo app Azure. Specify my domain. I can select from a select service scaling group. In other words, I can replace to a scaling group or to, as you can see here, to an individual big IP. I'm going to enable HTTP statistics. All that information you saw a little earlier there is all gathered directly from here. I specify my virtual servers, my backend pools. I have an extra node, so I'll take that guy out. I've got my backend workloads, once again, hosted in Azure. My virtual servers, so I'm going to create a forwarding virtual for port 80. That's going to direct people to 443. I've got my certificate there. I hit submit. Now, I'm using the magic of movies here. This takes typically about, I'm going to say about 4 minutes to deploy. And what that's doing is once again, deploying all that information, all those configurations on the big IP. The big IP is standing up. It's monitoring it. It's bringing back the traffic back to big IQ, not the actual traffic, but the identification to make sure it's up and running. So it takes about 5 minutes or so. So we did it here in about, I don't know, 30 seconds. Spins for a little bit. There we go. There's my application. All deployed, just like we saw. And then once again, all that information is available to me from one central pane. So I can have that guy deployed there in Azure. I can have someone deployed on-prem, deployed in another cloud, which we don't even talk about, but I could if I wanted to. Only Azure. All from one central place. Once again, this is important to note is that big IQ sits on premise, and we're doing all this across that ExpressRoute circuit over to Azure. Very quick, very seamless. You can see here I did it through a VPN connection, worked fine. Once again, for productions, you're probably going to really want to use an ExpressRoute circuit. Use a VPN as a backup. Pretty straightforward. Things coming down the road, we're constantly integrating, making, as I said, making everything cloud friendly as possible. So, you know, keep checking back with us. We'll check back with you guys for the things that are coming down the road. I won't go any farther about that, but there's a lot of cool stuff. So from my perspective, that's pretty much it. I know we're at 9:40, so we have like 5 minutes early. That's pretty good. So once again, thank you. This is the first time on Teams. I think it worked pretty good. I think we got the mute thing figured out. And once again, if you want to get in additional information, you have questions with regards to a specific joint customer, things like that. If you want to try out the technology, by all means, reach out to us. Our information is up there. We have Azure team at f5.com. That's everybody in this room, plus more that'll get that. And then, of course, mine's down there as well. You can always reach out to me. I love to talk to people. So great. And with that said, I am good. If we have questions, I think we have time for questions. I have one hand up.
Yeah, I posted. It's me, Brian, again. So I have a couple of questions about the big IQ integration with not just the F5 application footprint, but with all the other things that are being built in Azure that are network things. Meaning that if I'm deploying an F5 scale set and I have a template for it, does that big IQ control plane have knowledge of, say, which VNet I want to deploy it in, which region I want to deploy it in?
Absolutely.
How do I sort that out?
Right. So we kind of covered it very briefly there. So a couple of things you'll set up is you're going to set up a cloud provider. And all it is a configuration file that has your credentials to get into Azure. Then you're going to set up a cloud environment. For every region you're going to use, you're going to set up what's called a cloud environment. And we can actually, let me just jump back to it real quick here. So we have our cloud providers. Once again, I can have multiple clouds. I generally just have one cloud provider for Azure. These are my credentials, right? Then I also have the cloud environment. This takes a second. My cloud environment, this is where the big IQ actually does query Azure. So right now, what Big IQ is doing is it's taking those credentials. It's querying my subscription, and it's going to come back with all the regions. And basically, when I choose my region, it's going to automatically say, hey, these are your virtual networks available to you that are in there. Down here, for example, there's my VNets that are there in that region. There's my subnets attached to that region.
Got it.
These are the instance types available to me. These are the modules I want to deploy, in this case, Web Application Security, ASM, plus our AVR visibility, as well as the images that are available to me. And these are the images that are available to me in that region specifically to my subscription. So yeah, it does actually go out and query and bring all that information back to you. The goal is that your end users don't need to know that stuff, right?
Right.
Right.
Cool.
Absolutely. Okay.
Anyone else on the bridge, if you've stuck around, feel free to take yourself off mute. We have a lot of smart F5 people in the room, so if you've ever had a burning F5 question or more questions about the demo, this is a fantastic opportunity to talk to the team, so don't be shy.
I have a question. In that cloud provider screen, what credentials are required from a least privilege access standpoint to set that up?
Good point. So basically what's going to actually happen here is the big IQ, when it deploys, it's going to be deploying essentially an ARM template. So you need to have sufficient privileges to deploy an ARM template to create resources. The resources being created for an SSG would be a virtual machine and all the associated resources. So as long as your IAM account, your account has the ability to deploy load balancers, to configure NSGs, to deploy virtual machines, you should be good to go.
Yeah, we also have a template. This is Gary from F5. I'm system engineer. So we have a GitHub webpage talk about how to set up the service principal that would guide you through each step. Essentially, you need the contributor role in order to do some of the operation here.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. That's an excellent point. We do have our GitHub. We have several repos, but we have our GitHub repo F5 networks. We have all our supported templates in there. We have experimental templates. We have information like Gary was just saying as well as far as configuring things like your security principles, things like that, all up there. Excellent. Thanks, Gary.
All right, I have a question. This is Steve. Hi, guys. Thanks for having the meeting. So it's I think you guys referred to it once upon a time as tier 2 or tier 3 integration. And what I'm referring to is, let's say I use Azure Security Center, and it gives me a high severity alert to say you have web applications, be it microservices or IaaS, VMs, whatever. It knows that I have applications that are not protected by a WAF, but lo and behold, they are protected by a WAF because I deployed the Big IP Virtual Edition WAF as an ARM template on my own, and I did not deploy it from Azure Security Center because it does have that little widget that you can deploy right then and there, right? Because I did it outside of Azure Security Center. Azure Security Center continues to tell me I don't have a WAF.
Right.
I was told, yeah, is that something that's coming soon where the Azure Security Center, probably more of a question for us than it is for you, but
Yeah.
when are we going to recognize, or when are we going to work together so that Security Center knows I have a WAF, even though it didn't build from Security Center?
Yes, excellent question. So yes, to reiterate, if you're in Azure Security Center and you see an alert about needing a WAF, you can deploy out of Azure Security Center. One of the options will be a Big IP. That'll be either a new Big IP, or it can be an existing Big IP that's been deployed out of the Security Center previously, and you can reuse that for multiple applications. With what you're saying, though, is unfortunately, is if you deploy it using just out of the marketplace, or you deploy it using an ARM template outside of Azure Security Center to protect that application, that integration piece with Azure does not exist yet. Yes, we've actually been working with Azure on that for, help me out here, a couple of years now? Yep. Yeah, ever since we actually were in Azure Security Center, the very first question was that, well, hey, what if happens if I deploy outside of that? It doesn't seem to do some work on that. On what side is we are aware of it, and hopefully very soon we'll get that taken care of.
Could you
Okay,
like to us? I'd like to follow up on that specific item so that you have the latest information on that.
And that was Yuichi. Yuichi is our senior BDM on our team as well. So Yuichi would love to hear that stuff in writing.
All right, Jeff Bellamy knows who I am. Jeff, we met previously. Could you give him my email address? Or if it's not visible here? Okay, thank you.
Nope, we're good. Awesome, thank you. Dun, 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 dun.
All right, any more questions, folks? Great opportunity to talk to F5 if you are dealing with F5 at your customer sites and just need any wisdom on optimization. If not, I think they provided their email, so I'm sure if you have questions about F5 and Azure moving forward, if they can't answer it, they'll make sure they get you to the people who can. So
absolutely,
just good to make the connection. Okay, well, we'll give some time back. Thanks, everyone, for coming to this meeting. It was really nice to have F5 here. They're a great partner and do a lot for us in the networking space. So always nice to have them on board. And I think we have some other comments here from the F5 team.
just one thing, Craig, you mentioned it throughout the presentation there at least one time, but if anybody wants to get access to our virtual edition for your own lab, just reach out to the team and we can get you license keys so that you can get your hands on the technology.
Absolutely. Love to do that.
Cool. Okay. Happy Friday, everyone. And we'll see you next time. I'll send out an invite for the next show. I think the next show that's coming up is going to be Azure DDoS. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks, everybody.